allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Matt, you can use your password.
Yeah, we're having some communication issues here.
All right, so this first order of business is our minutes from last meeting. Does anybody have any changes? Second. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So Eric's not here. Do we know why? Let's skip over HS1 for the time being. And for the HS2, resolution authorizing the county of Oswego to accept a donation of 9 Recon Calabria 14-foot kayaks and trailer from Tailwater Lodge. Where's that? Do we get to come and use them?
You could use them. You know, it's a good problem to have that, you know, we work with Tailwater and trying to, you know, work together on different pieces, and they've found out that over the years, the kayaks are just not something they have any use for anymore. So they said, do you want them? And I said, absolutely.
So I'll look for a motion to discuss.
So they should give us more than that.
Questions? We have all the appropriate insurance, of course, and all that.
Yep, we have certified instructors who will be all water safety trained,
And we already have some canoes. You said.
yep, we have canoes, we use those, so these will just be added to the fleet.
All right, to the fleet. Sounds nice. Now a fleet.
You got a fleet? Nine's got to be a
Does that
fleet.
mean I'm like the commander of the ESS Navy? Or
We will name one after you.
Not your... Apparently I got enough stuff named after me already.
Including the parking lot, that's not paid.
Well, I heard the parking lot like the cemetery. At least an ancient one. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, move to HS3, resolution authorizing a budget modification of social services to adjust the fee schedule for indigent burials. I'll look for a motion to discuss here first. Do you have a second? Second. So I assume folks have looked over the schedule that we got here. Stacey, do you want to address this? It's something we haven't done since 2007.
Yeah, it was pointed out to Gidget and I by the funeral directors that they had not received a rate increase since 2007, January. And so Gidget looked through all the different counties our size surrounding us, looking at what's provided in their contracts. We discussed with 3 different funeral homes that were representing their association here. They had already been meeting about getting a rate increase. And basically, we've teased out some of the things that were included in one price, and we'll pay the actual cost of, Gidget, was it actual cost of the casket,
The,
crypt, or the
yes, the vault.
vault, and the cemetery plot, if they
And the
are
rocks.
choosing, yeah,
Yes.
if they're choosing to be buried.
Quick question. Do we currently pay for those items now?
It's
We pay
included,
for
it's included in one price, but yes, we do, we pay for them.
Do you have a breakdown of what that cost is or was? Or?
So in the packet, there should have been a copy of the old agreement from 2007.
Yeah, that's not it.
That's not in there?
It isn't, they only they did the draft burial policy and procedure, but it's just page 5 and 6, I think.
Yeah, so they only given the new ones?
Yeah.
How much did it increase the bottom line?
So the increase is probably gonna be, we figured 30%?
Yes.
30%.
There's 29%.
Okay, so for the record, folks need to be recognized by the chair in order to ask a question and have a table, okay? So we can go one at a time. So Jay is still up.
All right, so I'd like to get a copy of that before we approve this. The other thing, and there's several questions I have on it, if I could go over that.
Sure, here's the older one.
Okay. The other thing is that was my question too, was how much do we feel the budget's gonna increase? The rest of this year, because it's not in this year's budget, obviously, to put these increases in there. And if it isn't, where will it come from, I guess is my question. And wouldn't this should we make it take place if we're going to do it with a new budget for next year, as opposed to this year? I mean, I would love to see us actually trim that number so that we can use that more towards other parts of your department that need increases. You know, and if you look at that list of what our old rate was versus our new, I mean, I don't know why we would even do with services. I mean, we have a burial, cremation with services. It was 19, we're going up to 24. Direct burial, no services, I think 19, I think you could keep that in there, you should. And then direct cremation services, I think we should keep that in there, stillborn should stay in there. Transportation fee, I guess my question is, you know, is that a dual thing where they charge you for going to, you know, the wherever they're picking up deceased from? Or is it one way? And then the concrete we got in our rough box, we have the actual cost of that rough box. Is that rough box, is that referring to the grave liner only? Because there's two different types of vaults. You get into a vault that isn't
I got a question for you.
a grave liner, and it's a $3,500 vault.
Oh, no. I used the word incorrectly then.
Okay.
This is a grave liner.
Okay. All right. And then, we end up having to, for a winter charge, usually for the vault, that's a monthly charge or whatever they charge for a season. And I think, a cremation would help eliminate that if we didn't have to do burials. And then, of course, the grave site, most grave sites and most cemeteries, I think, are $1,000. We're saying that could be added in here according to the new law. That's why I was asking what the old one said. And then one quick question on number 9. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but it says recovery of assets. In some cases, people may have assets, personal assets, that they include when they do an arrangement or whatever. And they say, well, I have $1,000 and my mom had $1,000 in an account or whatever. And she might have a credit card or a debit tied to that. The problem we can run into is that that could be depleted pretty quickly by a family member. So I guess my question is, have we ever recovered anything like that? Because it should have been in last time, I would imagine. And that's it. Those are my questions. I don't know if that's something we can go over.
No, I think we should try and resolve it today because the funeral directors are pretty anxious about all this. So I think we should answer all your questions today. If we want to look at that old one versus the new one, we can go down point by point.
Okay.
If you'd like to see the actual details of it all. Do you have another old one?
No.
You gave up
Correct, I did get copies of that.
Okay.
What's the approximate budget for the year? I don't have my budget in front of me, and then, do you know the budget for the year versus how much we've already spent this year?
My understanding is it's covered under program, so we don't have a separate budget line for funerals. It's under whatever category the family falls into. So it would fall under your family assistance budget line or your safety net budget line.
Which we're underspending both. So we have, it would be budget neutral this year, that was one of your questions. We won't overspend, we don't need a budget modification to adjust these rates. Your others were, how does it relate to last time? So the casket, if I look right here, I'll have the right words, so I don't mistake. Number 6, the casket. So it's up to $900 or actual amount if less, and the receipt is required. And that used to be included in direct burials, whether it's with services or without services. And then the concrete rough box is required by cemeteries. And again, that will be an actual cost for the purchase of the concrete. I guess they do use the word vault here, but rough box. The department does not make any, nor have we ever made an urn or a memorial stone. There is, in fact, the transportation fee is both ways, and it is typically an area nursing home or hospital that they're going to bring the body back from the we were, actually there was a lawsuit quite a few years ago that Rich pointed out to me about paying for mileage, and it was for someone to be shipped back to their own country. It was out of country, and we didn't pay it. They lost the lawsuit. We didn't have to pay it. That was
That's nice.
in very short, that's a very short version of it all. It cost us a lot of money though, you know? So we want to have things in writing and very, very clear for people. That's why not to exceed 150 miles. There's not much we can do about a winter vault charge because the morgue is not going to keep them. The hospital, nursing homes can't keep them. So we really are, and there's not many winter vault places that we can go. So we only get $900 reimbursement, so everything above and beyond that is local share. And we're expecting, you can see in the info memo how much we spend. So right on the front there, 2021 was $560,000. And we buried 230.
Is there any-
230 Oswego County souls. Many of them have not a soul that would show up at calling hours. There's so many people that have no one in their lives. And then there's people who have a lot of friends, family, but none of them are responsible. And so not to provide even an hour of service, most counties feel is not being humane, to saying goodbye to the passing of a loved one. But if you so choose not to have any services at all, we can eliminate those.
Well, is a family allowed to pay for things themselves?
If they can afford it. But only up to a certain point. We don't allow certain, we won't pay and then they take over and have some big funeral, then they can have it all. So they might get, prayer cards, they might purchase another hour of services, is that it?
Yeah, and it is in there, In the supplementation piece, it says the additional stuff that they can purchase on their own, those would be things we would not cover under the cost. So on the first page, there's a supplementation section, which outlines the additional items that a family can purchase.
Oh, there it is. It's right down under number 1, supplementation.
Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, so under the burial with, well, I guess, the burial with, even with no services, does that include the casket? Or is that just
No.
a charge, $1,900?
$1,900 is what we are paying them to.
Right, so that's why it came out to almost $2,500 for the 230.
Okay, so there's nothing that goes with that.
Yeah.
So does the family choose the,
That's, yes. Oh, no. They have to prep the body. They have
No,
to.
I mean for the service part, there's nothing, I understand prepping the body and going to get the body's got mileage, but that doesn't include the casket?
No,
Okay, so you got a casket in there,
correct.
and you have a service in there.
No, the
That's
service.
what this is.
Right.
Okay,
Turn the lights on, keep the heat on.
and then who picks the gravesite?
If there's no one, help me out with
So
this.
if there's
Ginger.
no legally responsible relatives or friends that have signed off on the funeral arrangements, then the funeral home typically will choose the nearest cemetery, cost effective. They usually will recommend to us which one to go to. Because
Okay.
those are ones that we would have to sign off on, because there are no other people to do that.
So if there is family and they say, I want them to be here or her, then we pay that bill,
Correct.
even though that may be a lot higher than the cemetery over here.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a big variance though? I don't recall that there was big variance in the.
There's
cemetery.
some variance in cemeteries. It's gotten a little more varied over the last few years with the cost of inflation. But in the past, they were pretty consistent. And I think this might be part of the reason the Funeral Association is starting to look at these rates, because they're starting to see it impact their costs as well. So, but the cemeteries do vary.
Okay, so is there a cap on this?
Yes, there's all of the caps on the burial fees, number 1.
No, I
And
mean,
then
whole
each-
thing, said and done, you have a cap. We're gonna spend $2,500, that's it.
Is it capped by category?
Is it capped? You got it capped by what it is, and I'm okay with that, don't get me
Well,
wrong.
the
But is there a
stillborn
cap
is-
at the end of it to say, this is the maximum we're going to spend in this county to bury someone who can't have service and be buried? And this is the cap, whether it's 2,500, 3,000, whatever it is. Is there a cap?
No, there's never been a total cap.
Okay.
The cemetery charges, opening of the grave, those have always been actual costs. The
Okay.
rough box used to have a cap of $550. The funeral
Yes.
directors are asking for that to be removed because they were losing money on the costs they were paying for them.
Okay.
Typically, when we purchase anything, we don't usually get it for actual costs from a vendor, and I think that's what the funeral directors were starting to see as a concern. But the other things have always been actual costs in the 2007 plan that was previously approved.
Okay.
I let them know that this might create some discussion. Every county that's ever had to refresh their indigent burial has struggled with this. And they said, well, asked do they pay any other vendor actual cost? Or do they pay them so that they make money like every other business? Most of this is actual cost. If you paid for a funeral yourself, you know this is much smaller bill than what they would market the general community. There's public health laws about the disposable bodies. But, probably the cheapest way is just to do a direct cremation. But county attorney Rich Mitchell has advised us not to take that policy stance. There are some religious issues, some people don't believe, so if someone was to come back, what were some of the other issues with
I think religious was one of,
the biggest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to say that in all the years that I've done this work, cremations are becoming more common than burials. So, you know, your prices are reflected in that because we do see more people requesting, as long as there are family and friends that are willing to set up those arrangements. That's typically a more common request than it used to be in the past.
Mike?
Did you say what your budget for this category is? I have done the budget, what the total is for this year.
Oh, for 2022?
Yeah.
No, I do not have that figure. Do you know?
The cost so far this
So
year?
far this year?
No, I
I'm
didn't.
saying to you, the budget, what the total budget, I have done the budget process.
So it depends on the eligibility of that person, where we're gonna claim it out of, and,
Yeah, it just said it
It's-
comes out of different programs, it comes out of a different line for different regard.
right, we don't have one simple budget line for just
So
indigent
looking at the
burials.
total expended for the last 2 or 3 years, the last 21, $560,000. Okay. 20, that was 21 and 22, 20 was 517,000.
Going
So
up.
it's going up. So if you said in that, let's say it was 540,000 this year. Now you're looking at $162,000 increase in budget. Okay. So you don't know where you're staying, how much money's going to allocate for this year, where you stand, how much money is spent to date.
No, I can get that figure for you.
It's September here this week, so majority of the year is gone. Sure. So we should have a pretty good handle. I guess probably my concern, I'm not saying that there's not a need to increase the budget, but, you know, we're in the beginning of the budget process right now, automatically, without any lengthy discussion, to cause your, you can't hear me? I said, we're in the middle of the budget process, or starting the budget process, you know, if we approve this right now, we'd be increasing this budget on $170,000.
That's
So that
about-
is without any discussion.
Right, that's about-
Without even looking at some alternatives we may do it without any discussion. I think that
It's on the North Country.
Well, I
we
think,
should wait till we go through the budget process to address this. That's my feeling.
I got Jim and then her.
So I have one more question. If you've got a couple and either he or her passes away, but they're not in your system, they've managed to scrape by and exist, but they can't afford a funeral and they call you, do they get a funeral? Do they get buried, I should probably say.
if it's a husband and wife,
Yeah.
no, because one or the other of them are legally responsible for the burial. It's just husbands and wives, spouses and parents are
Okay,
legally
so if-
responsible.
You just said husband and wife, so,
And a parent of a minor child.
so it's only if there's one husband left or one wife left, not if they're married, they're, all right, so that would happen, still they're not in your system.
Right.
Kids call you up and say, we can't afford this, we can't do this. Do you pay for that, or do we pay for that? I should say you.
We could.
We could.
So, indigent burial does not have to be somebody who's already active, so they don't have to be known in our system. We look at legally responsible relatives and their availability to pay or make payment arrangements for a funeral.
Okay,
And that's how we base eligibility. If the deceased has assets, which I believe was spoken to earlier, we do resource referrals to our finance department to do asset recovery from that estate. So that's our normal process of that
Did you say
deceased.
that there is some reimbursement?
There is some.
$900.
It's just a flat. Herb. Okay, we got Herb.
It seems to me it's kind of hard to figure it out because it all depends on how many people die. I mean, well, if you look at it, 192, 230, 230, it goes up and down. So these funeral directors, I think they, and yourself, has got this down to the bare minimum. If they haven't had a raise in years, common sense is they should have a raise. I mean, everything has gone up, even burials. And yes, an average burial probably runs you $8,000 to $10,000 you got to pay for out of property. So I don't think they're asking anything huge here. I think there's common sense, and we all should realize it. It's been a lot of years since they got a raise. And knowing people that's went through this, it's pretty bare minimum what they get.
17 years.
Pretty bare minimum charge. I see.
15 years, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a long time.
Jay?
I've looked over the sheet. Basically, the cremation fee is not on there. It's not on the new one. And then the casket was put onto the new one, and that was not on the old one. So,
I thought cremation was on here.
It is.
It's in the number 1.
Yeah.
well, it had a separate line item
It's the direct-
in the previous.
cremation.
Oh,
First page.
Well, it just had it separately. It had a separate line item. You know, you've got it listed 1 through
That's all on.
11. I understand that.
Yeah, it's formatted a
So-
little different now, yeah,
Okay.
yep. But direct cremation is 1,650, and the cremation with services is 2,400.
Yeah.
Yep, and that was on the last one. It just wasn't on this one.
Yep.
The new one, that's all.
Frank?
Just, what happens if we don't increase it? If we just stay with what we have? What happens?
I can try to find, no, if we, maybe there's some Onondaga County, although our mileage would increase. I don't think, there isn't a choice about paying funeral homes for indigent burials. We have to. And if we don't raise them and they stopped, I'm not sure they would do that. These are pretty committed folk, pretty mission driven. You're not a funeral home director without being a mission driven. And, you know, I suppose they could all just refuse our bodies, I guess, right?
But-
They could refuse to do it, and then I guess we would have to get into the business of it. We could open our own cemetery.
But-
Some counties do own cemeteries, and we could open our own crematory and open our own, I mean, it seems like we would have to duplicate the business. I don't know, Phil.
But, yeah,
Which I'd rather we not.
Yeah, I really, I got my plate full. I don't,
the reason I've asked it is because you're not raising the direct burial, no services. That hasn't been raised.
no, it has because.
Well, yeah, but what, on here, what I'm looking at here,
No,
the
no,
rate
no,
for
no,
2022, okay, for the next year.
The old policy that included the, what we just talked about, the rough box, the
All
casket.
right, okay,
Now those are teased out. We just discussed that.
okay.
So it is. It is.
Okay, I did the math here for the past 1, 2, 3, so there are 4 years of data here. There's $100 variance between the average amount for each. So I mean, it's very consistent. It's basically going to come down to the number of burials that we end up doing times, an average of about a 30% increase. So I mean, we know what we're talking about here. We're talking about 30%, times the 2 times, however many there are. So 24, like 2,400 is the average amount, times 1.3, so it's now gonna cost us 3,100.
should get a $900
Plus we're still getting a $900 reimbursement.
Right. I just tried to get at our fiscal officer about how much we've spent thus far. It's not an easy number to pull, and we're already behind the 8 ball in trying to ready
Well, right,
2023
because you have
budget for
to
Thursday.
pull it out of multiple lines.
We are, and we're gonna have to go to each case, from the looks of it. She said, do you have the amounts for indigent burials authorized? She's putting it there, yeah.
I'd probably,
I said Gidget's in the meeting.
yeah, I'm not, my office.
Okay, does anybody have enough objection to want to amend?
I think we should turn the Rehill parking lot into a cemetery.
Well,
That'll knock 300
no,
off.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should make it someplace else, so I have two things. Okay?
I would just like to say that, you know, I'm not disagreeing that we shouldn't be doing something, because obviously we should. The only thing I'm looking at is that it's an increase in a line item that isn't covered, and it's gonna have to come out of our pockets somewhere down the road. So that's my reasoning for a little pushback, I guess, on this, just to making sure we're where we need to be, because it's gonna add up as years go on. That's my thought process.
Noel?
I'm not on this committee.
It's okay.
I wanted to say just a couple of things, a couple of thoughts that I had. I think your point about, like, if the people have absolutely no one, then who's deciding whether they get cremated or buried?
We do.
No, they're buried.
We have to, and
So
we never
why not
cremate.
cremated if, which is cheaper, if?
We would need, at this point, it's not being recommended by our county attorney.
Well, that might be something to address, because that would save the winter vault fees, and that would save a bunch of stuff. My second thought is, I'm all for private business. I think capitalism's great, but let's be honest, we all know that funeral homes take in a ton of money. I know that in my job as a realtor, I often give free services or minimal fees for people just to give back to my constituents, my family, my friends, my community. And I don't really see the harm in them doing this for a little cheaper.
Well, it sounds
Bite
like
the
they're
bullet, right?
It sounds like they're already doing it for cost, so that means, you know, does that mean that they're not?
So
Is it-
have they,
is it the
I guess
cost
my
of
main question
materials
is, have
or-
they refused to bury anybody? Have you gotten
No.
pushback where they're saying, we're not gonna do it for this price?
No. No
So-
one has refused to bury anyone.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm sorry if this already came up. You know, I heard you mention that you're paying for this out of multiple lines. Why is that? Why can't we create a single line to track the cost for the legislature?
So I'm not familiar with how they're claiming for reimbursement though, but when we write the pay lines, they have to be written off the case. So when I write it off that person's temporary assistance case, it's written off a family assistance case or a safety net case, that's why. So how
So
I.
it goes either the family assistance or safety net.
Correct. So depending on their category is where, you know, based on state requirement, I have to open a case and write the pay line off of that category. So I don't know on the back end how that all looks for you, but I'm just letting you know
So right
from
now,
my.
it's probably coming out of another fees and services line, and safety net and family services.
Family assistance, yeah.
And
could.
it does that automatically because it's written off of a case
You can start
payment.
charging them
Right.
$1,900 and doing that.
It's
So
not-
we could create a line in each of those departments for burials, and that way it would be tracked so that the
I think-
legislature, you know, could do a project line.
I'm not sure we actually could, but what we can do is we can track, because then it would show up twice. We've got a pay line there, buried in all of those other fees and services piece. And we can't really pull it out of there because it's been paid in order for us to get our revenue. What we can do is we can develop another spreadsheet, and just every time there is a burial, we can list 290 of them and just keep a running tab of it all.
Mike?
Does that help with your concerns, Jay? Is
Yeah.
it tracking the list?
Just so we understand it.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
And how do we come up with these total figures?
we have here in the list.
We-
Now, 516,000, 560,000, we come up with, how come up with that figure?
Correct. I have a recording system that is outside of WMS
Okay.
that I've created that I can pull the pay type, and it will identify every burial payment that has gone out in a specific time frame. So I already have that report created, which is where I can pull those numbers for you.
Yeah, okay.
So we have the numbers, it's just not in the munis system.
Right, it's not in BICS or.
That's why it is.
That's why you can't see.
So to go back to Noel's question, on someone who has no one, we're burying that person instead of cremating them?
We are.
And I can say that I've signed off on probably 3 in my tenure as the director in 10 years. Because we have family and friends that will sign off for people, so I very seldom have to truly sign off on an indigent
So
burial.
you're basically erring on the idea that the person might be of a faith that it would not be appropriate for them.
Correct.
For a couple. Okay, go ahead.
Or an autopsy is needed at a later date, or,
Yeah.
I mean, there were a few things that Rich, I mean, I trust Rich. If he tells me not to
Okay.
do something, I'm not gonna do it.
One of the things about cremations, everybody is saying that religion, I don't know of any religion, because I've looked on it, tried to look this up and figure it out. I don't know of any religion right now that requires, or that doesn't say you can do a cremation. I don't know of any. So I don't know where that's coming from. So I really need to, it'd be great to see that.
Well,
Not that I need it for
I mean,
this.
I've heard about it in the past, so I mean.
Yeah, but it's.
Whether or not it's written in some documents, you know,
Yeah, but we're-
canon of the religion, I don't know.
I was the commissioner in Lewis County before here, and I agree with Gidget, it's a very small number. But Mennonites actually don't believe in cremation. That is one religion I know of.
We're not paying taxes.
Oh,
Come on.
now we're getting into it.
But
They bury their own out in the backyard.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay.
They bury their own out in the backyard.
I think we've given this 15 years of time that it deserved.
I'll just need instruction if this isn't acceptable as to how to go back and negotiate and what kind of increase you would be willing to approve of. I'm not quite sure how to proceed if this doesn't go forward. Or if it doesn't go forward until after the first of the year. I know they were really anxious. They were feeling like we were already delaying them. So
Well-
we have them wait till the first. I'm happy to go back and take them that message. I'm happy to try and renegotiate if you let me know what you think would be acceptable. 0%, 10%, 20%, this is 30%.
Is this a professional service that could be put out to RFP?
No, it really isn't an RFP thing because sometimes we call a funeral home and they are unable to accommodate. And so we have to find somebody to get the body
How
out of the
do you
morgue or out of the
designate
hospital.
which one to use?
It's typically the family and friends who set up the arrangements
So
of where they
typically,
live, yes.
If they don't have any in those very few situations, you just pick who's like closest?
In those few situations, we usually have the funeral home contact us, like the morgue contacts a certain funeral home. I don't know if it's based on last residence,
Okay.
but then that funeral home director will contact us and say, I have a body that we need to take care of and we can't find any family or friends.
Okay.
Keep in mind though, those family and friends are not responsible for
Correct.
any of this cost. It's just a way of getting someone in place who knew and loved them and could make a decision about it.
All right, well, if no one wants to make a motion to table or amend, and ask for a vote on this, all in favor? Hands, all in favor?
Talk about it?
Any,
Yeah.
so opposed? So it fails.
I I make a motion to table it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Too late now. Too late now. Pull that shit.
So how do I proceed now?
I'm not opposed for the increase.
Three
But,
for, 2 against.
and that was the year, in 2006, since the last raise.
2007.
I just think that we should have time here to come up with alternative. I'm not saying we shouldn't increase this, I'm sure we should, but to do this in one motion right now, I'd have to say we need some time to
Just
prepare.
send that beforehand. Vote, we can table.
Only person that
Only
voted
the one people
and
that-
voted against it can bring it back to put it into motion.
No, voted for it. Voted on- If a person on
Opposed.
prevailing side, oh, you're right, in this case,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
prevailing side was no.
Okay, so Jim or Mike, do you wanna, pull your vote and then so we can vote on amending?
Be a motion to reconsider.
Motion to reconsider? They would, that, either one of you would have to do that motion, correct?
I would only do that if we table it.
Yes, that's the only way.
Well, you can vote against it again if we ended up
Okay.
trying to push back.
Of all the things you bring, and a lot of them are cloudy sometimes, and we have to work through it, this is a thunderstorm to me. I just don't, I can't quite wrap myself around it yet. I'm not saying it's not the right thing, I gotta process it. So I would do that.
Make a motion to reconsider?
I'll make a motion to
I'll
reconsider.
second.
Okay, all those in favor of motion to reconsider?
Reconsider.
Then we're gonna bring it back onto the table.
Okay,
In order to now, someone's gonna make a motion to table.
I'll make a motion to table.
And I'll second.
And then that way we haven't just denied it outright. We're tabling it to get a little more information and do this again at another meeting.
The funeral directors asked if they could meet with you. They wanted to come to the Human Services Committee. I mentioned that last month.
Yeah, I didn't think that would be necessary, so on my behalf, I guess.
Yeah, would you want to meet with them yourselves?
We'll decide that when we end up with it back on
We have a
our.
motion, on the table.
We-
We have a motion.
You already tabled it.
So did one of you make a motion? So,
He made
Yeah,
a
he
motion to
made the
table, I
motion.
seconded.
You voted.
okay, and we voted on the motion to table, so it is tabled. All
Did they
right?
vote on it? Okay.
But then I want to know what I should tell them and what I should do.
You can tell them that we tabled it and we're for further discussion and that we may have questions for them and we may have to meet with them.
Tell them it's not dead in the water yet.
If I can't figure it all out, I'll call you. At this moment in time, it just doesn't sit well.
Okay, it's tabled.
Make yourself a note.
Yep, we're gonna go back to HS1 now. Eric is not here because he is in training for
Send down,
his
send down.
accreditation.
I didn't get any mileage.
And Julie is here to
No,
help us along
hasn't
with
been
this one,
submitted yet.
so HS1 is a resolution
I got you, though.
authorizing the reclassification of one position in Veteran Service Agency. For a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
We got a second? All right. Extremely detailed. We have to talk to Eric about the length of his memorandums here.
I was already planning on that.
But it is his first one, and I know this is an important concept here to have three certified to be able to access the federal databases and do all of them, so they're all essentially equivalent in their ability to access all that they need to do for the veterans process. Julie, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you said it well. It was basically to allow more flexibility within the office to better serve the veterans in the community and to have all staff be accredited through the Department of Veterans Affairs, to, I guess, process their claims and whatnot. So when the director is in the other office and should a staff member be, out of the office or whatnot, but it definitely helps the office to better serve the community.
All right, so because of vacancies, this is gonna be budget neutral for this year anyways. And
Will be next year.
It will be next year as well because.
Right, because the state increased, the state increased its aid to county veterans agencies by $15,000, so that more than covers this salary grade change.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you, thanks. And now you know a lot more about indigent burials than you wanted to. Okay. HS3 is the resolution authorizing budget modification, Department of Social Services, employment and training to purchase furniture and for an increase in membership dues. I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion.
Second. Okay. Stacy, you want to discuss it?
So basically, you remember that Employment Services took over the Workforce Development Board. So we needed to expand a couple of offices. We took over for Barclays space, old space there in the Fulton building. And now we need to be able to provide equipment.
I believe that
Yes.
comes from the federal WIOA money, correct?
Correct.
No local share.
There's no local share, it's all federal money.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? HS5 is resolution authorizing budget modification, Department of Social Services mental hygiene to utilize New York State aid to increase mental health division wages. Look for a motion to discuss.
Make a motion.
You know, in retrospect, I almost think we should have kept Julie here, but,
Oh, we can call her back up.
yeah, well, maybe we'll need to consult with her, but Nicole is here. The state's giving us money to do a cost of living adjustment. It has to be spent just on that, which means by accepting this money, you'll be increasing several of our DSS colleagues with a COLA that is not only state funded here, but they're saying the money will continue. Nicole, you want to give a little more detail?
Sure. So in the state budget, they put in a mental hygiene workforce COLA of 5.4%, which I believe in April, I brought a budget modification to accept that funding. So at that time, I did not realize that it was also allocated against funds that are used to support our salaries in the county mental hygiene division. So upon learning that, that's why I brought this forward today. So the funding that they increased was across the board funding. Some of that funding is used for salaries in the mental hygiene division. So the 5.4% COLA, what I've put forward is to increase, apply that COLA to the salaries of the positions in the mental hygiene division. The state budget, the language in the New York State budget states that there's an attestation that I would have to sign about where those dollars are going, which all the dollars that get passed to our contract agencies that receive this have to do the same attestation. So without that attestation that you're spending this on your employees, the money will be recovered. So it can't be applied for anything else, and it was effective with the state budget, so April 1st, and so it can't be applied to cover 2022 contractual increases that went into effect for employees in January of 2022. So what I proposed was an implementation for September, start the payroll period, and apply the balance against fringe, so that we're not trying to do retroactive payments and calculations for that back to April 1st. But that it become, for January, annualized for the full year.
That's good.
And the dollars in the state aid letter are annualized, so it's a full. We received 9 months of the funding for this year. In future years, it's full 12 months of that increase.
Yep, go ahead, Jim.
So, don't understand the burial, but I did understand that. I do have a question. This isn't going to be a union conflict that this is going on?
That's why Stacy referenced it might be helpful if Julie was present. So there are 5 positions within the mental hygiene division budget. One is mine, there's a senior typist, and then there's 3 other titles that are unique to the mental hygiene division. So I'm not, certainly Julie would have an opinion.
I believe all the union contracts have a clause in them saying that nothing within the contract can be contrary to state law. If this has been passed as a state law, then the contract is superseded by that.
Go ahead.
I just have a very detailed question. So on your breakdown, you have 2 community services coordinators that are starting at the same wage, but their 5.4% is different. So I mean, is it because they started differently at the beginning of the year? I'm just trying to understand the difference.
Is it retroactive to different starting dates, or?
There are different starting dates, but I can double check that math and make sure there's not an error there.
But is it fringe in here too?
So these are just the salary, what are in the salary
Just
and wage
salaries.
lines.
I think one of the people has an increment between now and the end of the year.
That's what we were
That's why-
talking. Yeah, we were thinking it was something funky, but I thought I'd at least ask the question.
Yeah, and these are my calculations, so I would certainly defer to HR to be totally accurate about that.
I don't know why Phil ran out.
You might have done a couple.
Okay, so let's table this till Phil gets back for a second. We'll bring it back when Phil gets back.
He's back.
Okay, we just tabled it because I didn't know where you were going.
Oh, I don't like shooting from the hip. I just wanted to find that language in the contract.
Okay, so put it back on the table if motion. We have to have a motion to put it back on the, take it out of the table, move that down. Yeah. Well, sure. So let's leave the table and go on. If you can find it, let us know. Resolution authorizing creation of 3 positions in Department of Social Services. I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion.
Second. Okay, so Stacy, 2 of these have to do with, Medicaid work and additional work
Correct.
in the office.
Correct. Gidget, as long as you're here, why don't you jump right in?
With the Medicaid.
Yeah.
So recent changes in the governor's budget have increased the Medicaid income guidelines for our aged and disabled population, which is the population that is still administered locally. So there is our community population that is done at the state level, but our aged, disabled, and nursing home population is still done here. So effective January 1st, the income guidelines, which are currently for one person at $934, will be increasing to $1,583 a person. So that's a significant rise in the income levels, which we expect to see a very large surge of application and intake of Medicaid eligibility. In addition to the changes to the financial side of income, they have also increased their resource level. So people who may have been over resources before may now be eligible, which will add to that population of eligibility. We also expect people who may have had a higher income level and a spend down to start applying. So we think it's a very positive thing for this population, because a lot of them have kind of fallen through the cracks as far as health insurance eligibility, but we do see as people are living longer, that is a larger population of people who need dual eligibility. They have Medicare, but then they pick up Medicaid for that second coverage. They also, with the unwinding of COVID, so for the last 2.5 years, New York State has been in the public health emergency where we have not been allowed to take any negative action on Medicaid case. They've been trying to ensure that everybody who had health insurance in New York State remained insured to cover any medical needs they might encounter. As of January, they're expecting that to start to end, which means we now have to go back and relook at, as of June 30th, we had 9,474 in Medicaid cases active at the county, 9,474. So we have not heard of any income increases to these population. We don't know if they've moved. We don't know if anything's changed. So we actually have to reconnect with that entire caseload once the
Almost
public health
10,000.
emergency lifts and redetermine whether or not they are still eligible under the new guidelines. So in addition to the extra extra applicants coming in, we also have to relook at everybody who's already active within the county, which we expect to be a pretty large increase in work for our Medicaid team.
100% federally funded positions.
Jim?
If we got to the point where we didn't need to have any, we get caught up and things stabilize. I want to tell you, Gidget is very astute with systems thinking. She will pull back, and the next person who leaves, we won't replace. We're not looking to beef up. In fact, I'm getting to the point where I think we're going to have to hang them from the ceilings in order to get the work done, because there's just not a lot of space. But Jim, I'm sorry.
So my question is, where are you gonna get these employees from? You have issues now. Are these people that are going to be already in your system that will move up into this?
They could.
And then what happens to those positions down below, where you're not paying the same rate, and that's an issue that you're facing out there?
We're doing pretty good with social welfare examiners though, right?
So we have vacancies on the social welfare examiner end. We have 6 with the potential of a couple more coming up. We typically have about 5 vacant, and we tend to try to cover those vacancies as needed. In the past, when I started, a few of our examiners I actually had downgraded to support system staff. So the examiners, if we have enough to do this eligibility work, you see less need for those support. So it does allow for some of those support staff levels to move up. And then if we have a harder time filling the entry level, we still are getting the eligibility determined, which is what's most important for state and federal regulation.
Because that's a massive task of 9,500 people that need to be.
Yeah. The team currently is a team of 9.
I still have that concern.
Well, I mean, we know, we're still working on that.
I didn't say I was against it, I'm just concerned that
We're not gonna find the
complicate
bodies to
things a
actually
little
do the work, yeah, that's, keeps me up at night, Jim.
Okay. Mike, you have a question?
Yep, so you're adding more grade 8s. You're adding,
They're
you're adding,
eights.
that's not grade 8s.
They're 8s, correct.
But I'm saying, you haven't got any vacant grade 8s in the system now.
We do.
So you got grade 8, you got a position that's already established at grade 8. And you say there are vacancies, you got some you haven't filled. So
Yeah,
probably-
we'll continue to recruit for food
three more, I
stamps.
guess I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll continue to recruit for those assigned to food stamps.
75%.
But Medicaid and these new requirements, especially when it comes to the populations that are being served, is it fair to say takes priority?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
And again, it's 100% federal money.
You're talking about, just want to make sure I'm talking about the right one here. we're talking about HS six?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the position request delete budget form, and it says reimbursement 75.
That's the housing.
That's, there's 3 positions, right now we're talking about 2 of them. One, those 2 are Medicaid, that's 100%.
All right, I see the 100, okay, I see the 100 now. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? HS 7,
So the 3rd one is fine too, housing? That's
Yeah.
75%.
yes.
Okay.
They're already clear together.
Two, it's all this.
HS 7, resolution authorizing the creation of 5 positions in the Department of Social Services. This is to create. Oh, we've got some changes that, have you made Stacy aware of any of this yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Just replacing the budget modifications. Originally, there was one budget modification to affect both resolutions 7 and 8, but they should be separated. So this is the first one. Both of these resolutions go together. And you can't do one without the other, so that's why we do need to separate these.
Look for a motion to discuss.
Make a motion.
Second from Herb. Third from Jim. So, are these numbers are not mentioned in the actual resolution, are they, Phil?
One of the resolutions
The
does
second.
mention the 124,000 directly, so it should match the budget now.
So, for those of you that have been on the committee for a while, over the last few years, in 2018, the feds passed some new laws that you hear me talk about, family services, FIPS, preventive services, basically. But it's federal money, 4E money. 50% reimbursement we get from 4E money, and it was always just for foster care. But in 2018, the federal government said, no, we're gonna include preventive money in there, and that preventive money would be only used for evidence-based. So if we're going to capitalize on preventive money, which is to keep children out of foster care, which is a very expensive piece of our budget, especially right now. We're gonna keep them out of foster care, we have to use evidence-based and become credentialed in that evidence-based program. And so, biggest, after a lot of analysis of the community, working with CPAC, it was evident that what we needed was to keep kids out of care when their parents are going through addiction treatment. And we found this evidence-based program, sobriety, treatment, and recovery teams, also known as START. And there is one handout in your packet about START, although I've provided you folks presentations and other kinds of information. We contracted with a consultant who's been working with us this past year to ready ourselves. And we've developed policies and procedures. And we put an RFP out. And that RFP, frankly, when it came back to us, the paraprofessional, the family mentors would be making a higher wage starting out than a caseworker starts out at. So I was hoping if I delayed a little bit, There would be an upgrade in the caseworkers' salaries, and, but that does not seem to have been approved. So we need to just push forward. And we would like to award this contract to Farnham. And Farnham will be providing the family mentors as well as clinical supervision. And part of START is once they go into family court, it's immediate to assessment and treatment. So there's very quick timing here that you need supports in order to move the family along. So the first resolution would be to put, to grant the contract for START to Farnham, and to provide for the $124,000 for this year.
Okay, well, they're not in that order.
Ah, okay. Well, I want to put them in that order because
Pardon me?
if you,
Will be in the legislative packet, you gotta do the contract.
yeah,
So-
yeah. Because if you don't want to continue down this road of investing in an evidence-based program, we might as well not even bother with the second resolution. Because there would be, you know,
So
we're
are
not
we
gonna.
okay doing 7 before 8?
Yeah.
Okay. So are they, is Farnham, is this gonna raid our staff?
No, it's, well, I suppose they may,
I mean,
if
they're
they're,
gonna be creating new
if they're in
positions?
recovery. You might think of a family mentor like AA sponsor in the past, if you know what that role is. But not a lot of people are stepping up to that plate anymore.
Okay.
But this is a person who will have 24/7 supports to the family during the recovery. They themselves have struggled with addictions or in recovery, and ideally you would want someone who's also been involved in child protective services and received those services as well. So this is a very tried and true and old model. It's kind of like, I know the shoes you wear. You can't get much better. You know that much better. So it pairs a paraprofessional from Farnham with one of our professional caseworkers. They get all kinds of supports, and we wrap services around that family to try and prevent, especially babies. You know, I'm real concerned about how many little ones and babies, and then they go back to mom and dad without that secure attachment that's needed. So there's a whole bunch about child development, about brain development, you know, all kinds of pieces. As a social worker, this is just a must-have in our community, and it's a must-have.
Okay, other questions?
You see the ongoing costs, because that's just the startup and a partial year. I want to make sure people know that in our annual budget for 2023, it will be, you know that number off the top of your head? $414,291 would be the addition under our contracts, and that would be the annual cost for next year. Now, the revenue we have coming in right now would be the 62%. However, once Farnham gets up and running with these family mentors, they will be able to actually bill Medicaid for maybe about a third, closer to maybe 40% of the cost of their project. So we'll start to bring in Medicaid billing. Once we get credentialed, which should be about year 3, we will be able to get the 4E federal money, 50%. And then then that pretty much cuts our 38% in half. So I think it's very sustainable over time to get more revenue. And I have put a proposal in for the opioid lawsuit settlement money to pick up the local share of the Farnham contract. So, as well as the other piece you'll hear about next. Marty, is there anything else we need to brief our committee on? I think you really covered it.
So at what point will we be in a position to discuss that opioid money, Phil? Do you have one?
We can do that at any time, just get the proposals together. I was gonna get the proposals together and the department heads together and submit and have a meeting with them, try to work out a recommendation.
All right, and so how does this program overlap with other programs that we have ongoing right now?
There is no program like this. Right. Actually, there's no evidence-based program that focuses on treatment and recovery and child welfare in Oswego County.
And the outcomes for the families that are involved are much higher than people being ordered into treatment through court. I mean, they still are here, but we, the family mentors and the caseworkers are pushing in much closer to the families, and actually, the mentor will be taking them to treatment for the first 3 to 4 weeks of treatment to make sure that there's no reason why they can't get there and participate, let them know what to expect, support them in what it is that they're doing in the treatment sessions.
So your sense is that this may help prevent children from being sent into foster care?
Correct. The whole state of Kentucky does this. This is all over the nation, and they found for every dollar invested in START, savings of $2.22 in foster care savings. Now you got to give us a chance to get up and run, like you did with our Better for Families, which has been successful, and our Family Time Supervised Visitation, which has been successful. And trust me when I say these are heavy leaps and lots of work to get even to this point. But it's the right thing to do.
Other questions? I mean, we're pretty much gonna have to be willing to do the next resolution and pass it. Do we have to make an amendment to state that the budget modification is different than what's in the packet? Because it's in front of us now.
You can do a quick amendment to replace the budget modification sheet and do it in both resolutions.
So this is, so we'll make a motion to add the budget modification that leads with wages and salary services division at $60,700 per second.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment?
I'd like to do it.
Any opposed? Any final questions? All in favor of the amended resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, HSA, is a resolution awarding professional services contract to Farnham as the family mentors that we discussed. I'll look for a motion on that.
Make a motion.
Second. Jay's got a second. So do we have, is this locked into a 5-year, or do we have a analysis or reporting on the way? I mean, you're gonna know that it's working or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you need to give it all 5 years. And
Need to give it
this
all
is a
5
5-year contract, unless, I mean, if we really see no results, we can, there's a clause in this contract that we can give them proper notice and stop it, terminate it. But it does take a bit of time to get anything in place when you're launching a new
questions? Okay.
So this year is considered year one. Now, moving forward, what other mechanisms do we have to know that it's moving and working? I mean, is that something you'll report to?
I can absolutely report it out. Our national consultants will also, a big piece of getting our credential is collecting all of the different data sets and data points and finding what indeed we might need to shift or change in order to do better. Our judges are very supportive of this. And there's a lot of kids going into care. And again, this START program, if you didn't say this or you didn't see this earlier on, it's for children under 6. So 6 and under would be, or under 6. Under 6.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, I'll make a motion to bring back HS5, so we can finish that off.
So moved.
All right. So you're a second, I did the first. Let's do the, yeah, right. Okay, so this is back to HS5, which was the budget mod for mental hygiene to utilize New York State aid to increase the living wages using COLA. Phil has a little extra information here, recommending approval.
Yeah, incredibly my memory was right. Your applicable laws and your contracts are worded, this agreement shall be governed by the Public Employees Fair Employment Act and other provisions of the Civil Service Law, Judiciary Law, local laws and resolutions that ain't consistent with the Act. So whether or not that this COLA, when the state budget passed it, it was referenced to the Public Employees Fair Employment Act, we don't know, but we are researching it and HR is going to find out. So my recommendation would be to go ahead and pass this on, and we will know by finance and personnel whether there's any conflict with our union agreements, and we can act accordingly to that. So right now, I'm going to assume the state knew what they were doing, and they referenced that law when they passed the budget and that 4 and 5 cents.
Now we have some time before the regular meeting to figure that out if it's not correct.
Right.
All right, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that's it for resolutions. One thing, I did forget to amend HS8. It looks to me like it says not to exceed the 124,855 annually year 1. So the resolution looks correct to the to this budget mod that you have in front of me. But even though the budget mod wasn't in the packet.
Right.
So we're okay with that, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we can sign all these budget mods now.
Here they are. These are the ones you need to sign.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, well, there's 2 more.
Yeah.
There's 2 more than these, right? These are the 2 new ones.
Right, and these are all 4.
Well,
right here.
oh, because you signed those.
Yeah, I got to sign it. And Stacy, make sure you sign them too, we'll go around, because there's no department signature.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna just sign these and then we'll send them around.
Thank you for your patience, colleagues. Get your thing, Ross, sorry.
Yeah, unless you're gonna go to that, yes, so.
Oh.
Is that on here, then
Yeah.
the Nicole showed me when I got here.
I can.
I mean, I could say, that's fine.
Yeah,
I just-
okay. Just gotta know.
Yeah.
I was just thinking the resolutions are.
She said, you're on there.
Okay, so we are now to committee review and decisions, eligibility determinations and systems reform. Thank you, Gidget, for your time today and your expertise. This is titled Replacing WMS and Oswego County's Role in the Transformation into Integrated Eligibility System, IES. You have the floor.
Thank you. So I think, for those of you who don't know me, I am Gidget Stevens. I'm the Director of Assistance Programs out to the Department of Social Services. I have been with the agency for 29 years, and I have been sitting in the director's position for 10. And we have, for years, worked with a pretty antiquated system, which we refer to as the welfare management system. The Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance approached me at NIPWA and asked if our county would be willing to sit on the work group for the eligibility, enrollment, case management implementation of a new computer system that will replace the existing systems as we know them, including our welfare management system, including our benefit issuance control system, including our employment system and our child support system. So I just kind of wanted to let people know this is a pretty big project that they've asked us as Oswego County to be a part of. We are going to have the ability to sit in at the ground level and test out this new system, which will be, I tell people, kind of think of it like your patient portal, where you're utilizing for a lot of your medical assistance programs now. There will be a face for the clients in our community where they will actually be able to go in and request things from the agency without having to come in. And there will also be automation on the back end, which will simplify a lot of our processes and hopefully increase eligibility times, will improve communications between teams. So our child support system will talk to my system and will reduce a lot of the requirement for paper referral and the administrative burden that sometimes comes with the programs and the that we are administering out of the agency. So as we move through the systems and we get updates, I'll be sure to share those with Stacy so she can let you guys know. But they do believe that Oswego County works pretty efficiently, which is one of the reasons that they approached me at the last conference and asked if we would be willing to participate. So I appreciate Stacy letting me take the lead on the project because it will take a little time, but as she stated before, systems thinking and efficiencies is really my passion, and I like to make sure the work we're doing is good but also efficient. So I think that once this goes into play, which hopefully will be before I retire, hopefully, you guys should be able to see a lot of really great improvements on how our work is being done out of the agency.
WMS, for those of you that's COBOL, that is DOS driven. It's not a relational database. So I know Roy was very frustrated in trying to grab some information out of WMS because we expect things now. But when it's developed in the 70s and it hasn't been upgraded, our biggest fear is it's just going to crash and die one day. Well, they had to do a national to try and get COBOL programmers to fix some things. And then when they teased New York State of Health, Medicaid out of there, it still got a little shaky.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a true transformation. I believe we will see cost savings with staff.
So
as a result
who's
of
supplying
this.
the software?
So the state, DOH, OTDA, and OCFS are working together through their central IT systems, and they are contracting out for the software. They're actually in the procurement process of getting a vendor for that system, and they expect once that happens and it's finalized, we'll start to see better movement because they'll have benchmarks for payment. So there's been a lot of data collecting. We've been pulling data from all the old systems in preparation, and then as we start to move forward, we're hoping that it'll pick up.
In the meantime, there's no cost involved with
No.
this, and so it's just a blessing of the
Well,
commissioner.
it's a cost to our staff.
Right.
Because their time. There'll be times when Gidget will be devoting 50 to 75% of her time on it. This isn't a little ask by the state, but we are the best positioned because we have experienced people. There's not a lot of people at Gidget's level that could go to a desk and open a case up. Gidget still can. And you gotta have an end user that knows all levels I am proud as can be of Gidget being asked and being able to step up to the plate. And we will support her in that, because inevitably, our work here in Oswego County is going to impact the whole state. And more importantly, our clients. You know, it's going to be so much easier. Most people are pretty savvy now when it comes, so this is going to hit all of the things we do off VIX right now, our 4E claiming, out of services, adult protective, child protective. This is going to hit all kinds of places where the state systems right now are archaic.
It sounds like it's long overdue. But
Oh, way long overdue. Kind of like the indigent burial rates upgrade.
Okay.
Just,
Well, thanks for taking that on, Gidget. I hope it works as well as you hope. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. And Joe, I think Brian's gonna let you go first there. Thank you for, now you can speak. Are you sure you don't want to have soil and water be under the Human Services Committee?
and this'll show you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I've generally, as Roy mentioned, we generally report to the EDP committee. But in this case, I've visited this committee a couple different times, and regarding the hemlock woolly adelgid that's been found in the county. What I'll do is I'll introduce that briefly, because I know I've talked about it over the past year or so a couple different times, but I'll just get you up to speed on that, a brief summary, and then I do have two different requests, one having to do with our pesticide treatments that we currently have a contract for, and the next one is for a biocontrol release that I presented to the committee in the past, and have some additional information for that. So first I'll just introduce the hemlock woolly adelgid. It's a very small invasive insect that kills hemlock trees, and which is very, very important to this county in general. But it was found and confirmed on county property in 2021. As soon as it was found, we started kind of formulating a plan to try and control this. What it does, it does cause mortality after about a decade. So you'll start to see a decline. You'll start to see loss of foliage, decline in the health and vigor and growth rates of the tree, and then after about 10 years, you'll see complete mortality. So when you do have it in pretty significant quantities, such as at Camp Hollis and Independence Park, which are two county-owned facilities, you can have some. When you have recreational facilities, you can have some pretty high safety risks there when you have a lot of dead trees. And just for example, at Independence Park alone, we inventoried about 1,100 trees there. So you can picture the trails traversing through those areas, beautiful areas. You're obviously having some visual impacts. There's countywide, would be an economic impact with the loss of that tree, but more so, you have the ecological, the habitat, but I think the safety risk on the county properties is a big one. So what we did in 2021 was we did get authorization from this committee to move forward and coordinate pesticide treatments. So we took on the mapping associated with the layout, marking of the trees, things like that. We ended up coordinating with Onondaga County Soil and Water Conservation District, because they do have a certified applicator. So we were able to take that on. The contract that we have with the county was up in July, and it's a very narrow window to be able to treat this effectively, essentially spring and fall. One issue that we ran into is there were wetlands at Independence Park, and we were not able to finish the area. Basically, we have a lot more area to get into. We did finally get that wetland permit. Unfortunately, it was after the spring window, and this contract goes until July. The other issue with the treatment is it's not just a one and done treatment. So realistically, you have to move through an area. It may take you about 3 3 years to treat this, 4 years, and so this would be year 2, I guess. So we may have another year or so, and then after the treatment is good for 5 years. So we have to actually tag the trees, mark them. Then the trees that were treated in year 1 should be treated again in year 5 because it's effective for that long. We use a tank mix, and as a result of those 2 different pesticides we use, there's diameter restrictions associated with those, so we can only treat so many diameter inches in a given area. So if I think it's somewhere around like 175 or something along those lines. So if you have all 10-inch trees, it's right around 17 trees, but they do have a tendency to, I guess, average in between 12 and 15 trees per acre. There's a lot more on site than that, so it takes us a few years to treat those. My recommendation would be if we could get the contract renewed until at least through the end of the year. We do have in there a caveat that it's up to a certain threshold. I think it's $9,500, and we have spent some of that, and that cost is split between Youth Bureau and the Soil and Water District. So there's a little over $6,000 left in that, and I've talked to Brian about that. I believe they have that in the budget. They're well aware of that, so we would split that cost if we get up that high, and we could. We have about 200 trees planned this year, and then that way, if we were to extend that through the end of the year, I can take a better look at what we have left and what that might cost on an annual basis to keep doing that. So that would be my first request, and I think probably if we can, I don't know if you want to deal with them individually just to make it, because once I get into the biocontrol, I know that's obviously a different story, different request. So my first request would be if we can extend that contract through the end of the year.
We need a resolution to do that, don't we? I mean,
We didn't do one for the original.
we did not.
We talked about it in committee. I don't see one, and then we have the contract.
So we never approved it out of your, I mean, is it?
How much
Did we
is
talk,
it?
this,
It's
I think
under
we said it was
10,000,
under.
it's 95.
It's under a certain amount, so it doesn't have to go through committee, it just goes through contract review, with,
So
is it under 5 or under 10?
under 10 is 95, but that's split between.
Yeah, and they just increased that threshold to 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that, it doesn't require a committee, but if you want coverage, the committee can bless it by motion.
Yeah, Joe and I were reviewing the contract just from our end. We feel the only change needs to be the date change.
And then next year, I would have to probably revisit it with a little bit better idea how many trees in a given year we would have to
I don't see
treat.
any need for a resolution if they can do it, then if Brian can do it.
So I could probably just amend this contract.
Well, it probably requires a chairman's signature.
Yes, but I mean, it's
Yeah,
making
yeah, it
amendments.
goes through contract review up to the
Okay.
chair.
Okay, perfect.
So part 2.
All right, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
As far as part 2, I approached the committee in I think March or April of this year, and we talked about a biocontrol release. So it took me a bit to track down the right literature and things like that. I know there was some apprehension, but what I'll do is I'll go back through. You're passing that. I would just like to address those concerns, and I do have some paperwork. I'm not honestly sure if this made it in the packets or not, and if somebody doesn't have one, let me know. Okay. So the last, yep, absolutely. The last committee meeting, I just went over the fact that we were approached by what's called the New York State Hemlock Initiative. And they're a Cornell University organization funded by New York State. And what they do is they're interested in biocontrol. So in this case, it happens to be small, predators, insects that they do release and study for establishment. And then what they're looking for is control of the hemlock woolly adelgid. So in this case, there's 4 different insects. 2 of them are beetles, and then there's what's called a silverfly, a couple different species, and the intent is to release those. They prey on the hemlock woolly adelgid in different stages and control them, and what they're looking for is kind of we're sort of a perfect area what they're looking for. These have been released over the years. These insects have been studied for anywhere from a decade to 2 decades. and do have approval for release through APHIS, which is Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So it's a USDA agency, federal agency. And they have studied those and approved their release. And I know the last time I approached, the committee was looking for some maps and some information about the insects. I was hoping that you would have this maybe something you would like, would like time to review, because obviously this is a little more information than you can go over on site here. But going through that, I've included basically just a summary on the top. Okay. I've included some information about each of the insects. So there's some slides that the Hemlock the Hemlock Initiative put together for us, for me, and to pass along to you guys. And then there's two maps of which covers each one of each of the species, or at least the genus of these different insects that they would like to release, and it shows the different releases. It also shows the established populations, which is not it's not a huge number. So I mean, they're looking for some successes, and they're thinking that the lakeshore would be a great spot. And we're kind of on the forefront of the infestation of Hemlock woolly adelgid. It's really has sort of an eastern movement, and what they're obviously afraid of is we're kind of the gateway to the Tug Hill and the Adirondacks, and they're looking to potentially establish this and try and control that insect. Now it's to try and control the Hemlock woolly adelgid. So it's not a fix-all by any means. You have to have an integrated management plan, which the first part of that is the pesticide application, and you really have to continue that. I would say, you can revisit things in maybe a decade. Unfortunately, once you have this, it's a big deal. You have to be persistent and try and get this under control. But there isn't anything that's a long, necessarily. I guess this would be the long-term effect, fix. But there isn't a magic bullet or a spray that's just going to end it. You'll always have this pressure, I think, from the outside properties. But the idea between the biocontrol release is that they are allowed to spread beyond the property lines and beyond that to some different hemlock trees, and hopefully get established and have some control. But like I said, it's definitely not an overnight fix, that it's a long-term approach, and hopefully they're obviously looking for municipal properties to get these released and established. So I've given some, like I said, some information on each of the insects. This summary sheet, the top one, does have two websites that do have some information. One is just general about Hemlock woolly adelgid, which I've given you some of this, but obviously you can see some kind of a pictorial description. And then you'll also find the Hemlock Initiative website, which is a New York State organization, and that will give you some information on how they're released. They're really essentially released in different stages. It just depends on how they try and get that insect established and out there.
So what's the cost?
To the county, there is no cost. It's all paid for and funded by the New York State Hemlock Initiative. There may be some input on Soil and Water's part, just with perhaps meeting up, showing them, the site, that kind of thing, maybe helping with field work. But other than that, there is no obligation as far as funding. And the work itself, it sounds like it's too late in this season. It would be something for next season if the county is interested in taking part. I do know that there's some. I think that Selkirk Shores, the state is maybe taking part in that. There was some discussion about that. So, and as far as timing with the pesticide too, obviously you're dealing with insects and you're putting a pesticide on the land. We do have some timing issues with that. So depending upon when we treat for or if we're able to treat next year, we would obviously have to really time that very well to make sure. I think we need about a six week gap before they release the biocontrol. And you can do a spring release and a fall release. So
they've already been releasing two of these insects for years.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And they're and as far as something like a form or a kind of a checklist that says, okay, there hasn't been any issues. Essentially, that they wouldn't there wouldn't necessarily be the permit, I guess, if there were any negative impacts from the from the insects. So that's the idea behind studying. They're studied in a lab, they're studied in a very confined area, and then what they hope to is to establish these populations. So it's not something that it's when they release it, they 100% are guaranteed that will bring control of the hemlock woolly adelgid, but it's that studying and studying it, time frame that we're in right now, I guess, and trying to establish. Well, I'm saying, what's that?
So
Good-
what do
good
you
hope.
what do you feel like you need from us for this? Brian, have you guys talked about this?
Well, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in March when he first brought this up, you invited him back to the committee to follow up with what was
Yeah, well,
more
because there
about
was
this.
some nerves about the idea of releasing insects from another part of the planet here.
We got enough insects. We got plenty of insects.
I mean, I don't know if you guys need what he needs for today or what. I mean, obviously this probably wouldn't happen until 2023.
Correct. Yeah, there's a little bit of time if you guys want, if you'd like to read the information. There's not a lot more that I can supply other than getting into real in-depth studies about really specific characteristics of the insects themselves. But
why don't we leave it at that? We'll look at it and bring us in the future a resolution, if we need it.
Yeah, we could. What we'll do is I'll report back, and when Joe comes in, not like in January or December, to let you know where we ended up this year, and then we can bring it up again. And if we want to proceed, then I'll bring a resolution to go from there.
What's the advisory committee, the environmental advisory committee?
Environmental Management Council?
Yeah, is this something that we would run by them?
I kind of
Report to them?
Ask them to take a look. Ask them to take a look at it and report back to you.
Meet to EDP? Or both, whatever. That could be in writing,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Well, basically, they report to the legislatures. Yeah. They should just write a report to the legislature and decide whichever committee you want to go
Okay. Nate, you missed that whole pile right there.
Looks like busy.
It's amazing. It is truly amazing. I mean, the fact that you have the USDA, approval speaks pretty well to it, so. So we can leave that at that for now. And thank
Unless you
for your
guys
time.
require anything else, then yeah.
Brian, you have an update for us?
I'll do it under a minute. I'll do it literally under a minute.
All right,
Clock me.
I'm starting the timer.
A lot of the stuff you're going to get in my with my budget things, but just as a summary, Camp House had 636 campers this summer, 275 were day camp, 361 overnight. Compared to in 2019, again, which was our last full year before COVID, we had 501 campers, so we had 135 more this year than we did in our last year before that. We served 8,967 meals to our kids at camp this year. Senior camping was held June 14th, and it will be again on September 13th. Camp Rainbow Hope was a success again this year. That was held on the week of August 15th through the 17th. We've been working with our grants for the bluff restoration and the building winterization at Camp House, and both of those are moving along quickly. We're moving along. We're expecting to break ground on all of those, if not late this year, then the beginning of next year. At Camp Zerby, we had a successful summer program. We're looking to expand that program next year to 6 weeks from the 4 this year. 120 campers out there, which was good, hitting close to our capacity where we could be. We continue to work with the development of the property. The Packer Malone building is scheduled to be worked upon this fall to be finished, and you'll see when the time comes for my budget for next year too that I'm adding a revenue line for that, because that will be a year-round building able to be rented at Zerby. We had a summer work crew at Independence Trail. If you look on social media, people that live out there have been taking pictures of it, and they love what's been happening. They've been doing a lot of hard work out there. We're looking to continue that. And lastly, on August 25th, I was officially informed that our AmeriCorps grant was accepted for another 3 years, $323,870 for our program beginning on November 1st, 2022. And really that's about all I'll go into without more details if somebody has questions.
Jim?
Clock.
Did you get the missing parts for the playground?
That's my next spot with bringing Rich involved in that soon, but we got part of them. They still forgot to,
Still forgot.
which they're owning finally. They're finally owning that this is finally their mistake that they have owned it, but it still leaves us in a, what's that?
Do we need to go get them?
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, it's what we're all dealing with in today's age with, shipping and where we're at. But, it's all there except for two parts, and there are two pieces we need. But, no, I don't have those.
Okay.
Other questions for Brian? All right, thank you.
Thank you for all the info.
Yep.
Yes. Sarah?
Okay. So, I did pass out, I don't think I got Phil or Legislator Emmons, who didn't mind passing them that way, my update. So today is the first day of early outreach applications for heating assistance. It's hard to believe when it's 90 degrees out, but heating season is right around the corner.
Did we save some of that?
So we're gearing up to start receiving applications in the end of this week, if not early next week. We also were able to hire an aging services specialist, so now we have our 2 insurance counselors. Well, they'll be starting on Tuesday after the holiday. Just a side note, there were only 3 cases that we had to promote to the state to work on during, while we've been training and getting high-cap insurance counselors, and we did provide the Medicare number of times, but there were only 3 difficult cases that we were unable to assist during the time when we've been training. So even though we put out the notification that we are halting insurance services, we did continue to assist people, and only 3 cases had to be promoted on. On a side note with that, we do have 8 staff that have to take civil service exams, 7 of them in November, which is over half of our staff. So fingers crossed that will all go well, and we won't have to perform job search or do additional interviews for anyone who is not reachable on the list. OFA is working with the State Office for the Aging to bring the documentary in All the Lonely People. It will be live streamed on October 28th, which is a Friday at 1 p.m. They're actually going to be in Onondaga County on that day, and we're live streaming it from there to Oswego County. We're looking for a location right now to be able to do that. I originally was thinking with the schools, but with a Friday at 1 o'clock, the documentary is a little over an hour with release. I don't think that's a good location for it, so we're continuing to look and find a location to be able to live stream that. It is, we followed isolated people for 2 years to document how they overcame that social isolation and loneliness. And they started the project just before COVID, so it captured all the COVID isolation as well. We're also, as part of our disability awareness grant that we received, we'll be having a speaker engagement event in November as part of our Caregiver Awareness Month. It will be at Springside at Seneca Hill, but we have not narrowed down a date yet because we're working with Springside on what's going to work best for them. There's not a lot of parking in front there, so as part of the grant, we can do valet parking so that people can get right to the door, and the car will be parked for them. We're also just started organizing our 2022 Santa for Seniors program. We're hoping to reach 100 seniors this year. We're going to be bringing in the volunteer fire departments to see if they will assist with delivering the gifts, because it's great that we can connect the people that want to donate and adopt a senior and get those gifts to the seniors, but getting those gifts delivered, and if there was 100 different recipients before Christmas, is just very hard for us. We delivered over as it says here, 72 last year we adopted, or were adopted, and it was hard to get them, all those packages delivered. It's not just one package, some people might have 5, 6, 10 items that have been purchased for the senior. We're looking to get 50 food boxes as well. We are going to be purchasing 4 aluminum ramps. We're working in conjunction with RISE with our CARES Act funding to get those aluminum ramps for our seniors. We also have purchased 2 6-foot suitcase ramps. They're aluminum. Those are in our office. Those are for people who just have 1 or 2 step into the house, but they can't get their wheelchair in. That is also, it's not just somebody that has a high, and needs a big ramp. Some people just need a small ramp, so we have 2 of those. Again, that's through our CARES Act funding. Now going to what we have done. So we did have our senior picnic on Wednesday of last week. It was at the VFW. We were all set for 100 participants. We had 82 that showed up. They were provided a boxed lunch. We had entertainment with Sam Damacola, which was terrific. We were able to provide busing. We did not get a lot of response for people needing that busing or wanting that busing, but we did have it available. We had locations in Central Square, Fulton, and Pulaski to get them to the VFW. That was paid for with CARES Act funding as well that we have. We also, during that event, we recognized our Senior of the Year, Ellie Filburn. Last month, I had reported that we had 3 OFA case managers in training for CAPS. We actually were able to get a 4th case manager in. So they started that. They've all had their first day of training. And that's moving along well. We also received our first 5 LEQ artificial intelligence units. They have not been deployed yet. We're working with the recipients to get them into the home. And I would really like, once they're deployed and they're using them, I would like to set up something so you can see how they work. I was hoping to bring a unit in and set it up and show you how they work, but each unit is assigned to a person. So it is tied to them and the responses to the surveys that they have, so I couldn't do that. So what I'd like to do is have them tie into a meeting somehow, and they can talk with us through their unit so you can see how it works and how they're liking it. We have 10 more that will be coming in. They're sending them out in increments, so we're getting 15 total. We're also in the process of onboarding our first 5 participants into the Virtual Senior Center. We have 30 slots. We had a little bit of a hiccup because there's an online process to register, and it ties into a Google Docs account. I had to get approval to set up an OFA Gmail account so that we could get those registrations, and we just got the approval for that. So those first 5 will be set up soon for the Virtual Senior Center. And again, what that is, it ties them into, via Zoom, into live programming. So they could have a cooking show, they could have a yoga demonstration, it could be learning another language. So that's, and they're not tied to any limit, so they can do as much as they want. They are signing, though, that they're going to be participating at least 2 hours a month in some programming, though. So that is really all the new stuff that we have going on at the Office for the Aging. We certainly always have our old stuff that's there. It's always there, hanging out in the background, but those are some of the new things that are happening.
So they now can do CAPS virtual. 10 years ago when I took it, it was 1 week, 10 hours a day in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Yeah, it's 3 days training. After each day, they have, at the end of the day, they do take their test. Some of it, the first day of training, I was told that the first half of the test was kind of common sense. The second half, if you weren't listening or paying attention, it was very difficult to answer some of the questions.
So do they stop them the next day if they don't pass the test?
They don't. It's not all 3 days. It's, well, they all pass the test, so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
But the next one, it's a few weeks apart actually, it's a month apart, so they did their
yeah.
first
Ours
one,
is-
then they'll do their second one in September, and their third one will be in October.
Ours was Monday, pass the test, you don't pass the test, we'll come back Tuesday. And out of 30-some people, there were 7 of us there. Made it to the final. And you do have to pay attention.
Yes, and then we were able to get 4 staff. We have a couple other that we're hoping to get next year. I want all my case managers to have that, so they go in the homes to do their assessments.
That is a great program. Very, very good. Very proud of you guys. Amazing program.
Thank you. Great, thanks. Unless any other questions? Okay. Nope. Stacy, department updates, social services. Thank you for your patience.
Well, you read about homeless and housing issues with asking for another SWE. We are up about 64% this year. Gidget is got quite a team, and these cases are much more complex. And as I've said before, a lot of it is because the state has really shut down supportive housing, group homes, things where people used to have a way to live in the community safely. Gidget, what else with homeless housing?
I would agree. It's a very vulnerable population. A lot of mental behavioral health concerns, substance use disorder. In addition to the numbers, the population is probably 5 to 10 times harder than what we've dealt with in previous years. The last couple of years has taken a very large toll on this population because of the isolation, and has contributed to some of their concerns. So.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks in a row now, we've had either last weekend, I think it was the police, the week before, no, 2 weeks ago was the police. Last week was an ambulance for suicide, people actively suicide. So,
Wait.
at DSS.
Right there.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, I know there was somebody they picked up on the front steps middle of last week. Right?
Yes. We locked the agency after some concerns and calls, so.
So
Yes.
I am getting 4 to 5 recommendations, referrals from Unite Us every week from Onondaga County that they want to come into this county because they can't seem to get services in Onondaga County.
We're not gonna get them here.
That's,
I don't know what they're thinking about.
yeah, we've got them really pissed off at us because it's what we've done. Sorry.
I mean, they've got their own emergency aid system.
We got it, we don't refer them out to you, it's just, and we've never had that until about a month and a half ago it started.
Yeah.
And it's like 4 and 5 a week.
Well, we're still doing our surveys, you know, and I can compile that information for you and pass it on. But, you know, the bottom line is the majority of people who arrive to our doorstep homeless are Oswego County citizens.
Yes.
They're not from another state or another. They're not from
Yeah,
Onondaga.
because we don't refer them, we just tell them don't come. You've got services there, you're gonna have to connect them with them.
Last week, Frank Bombardo contacted me, and we met with the town, the village board members, the school superintendent in Mexico, and their DPW super who has had a long list of homeless encounters there. You know, I had to kind of explain that, and I think a lot of those were, you know, you have to have we talked about the idea of trying to contact the sheriff and isolate what could be some good times for them to go. But their take was that, you know, I mean, they seem to think, well, because these are people that need services, they end up being homeless close to services somehow. So there was sort of an attempt to blame it on the office being there for whether or not that's true. But I did have some good, you know, I sent what I ended up sharing with them with Gidget, and she said I did all right. So, but it seems like there is across the county an uptick in encounters, homeless encounters, and is, the best, if they're breaking the law, call 911, but if they're, or, if they're trespassing, whatever, or, some public offense, but if they're not, it's it's Oswego County Opportunities that has the staff that will actually go out and visit sites.
Outreach.
So, is that a pretty accessible number? I didn't actually call it, but I shared it with them.
Yes, they have a hotline number for 24/7 that you can call, the number that was on
So
your
will it
information.
get them, or will it get 211 if it's not staffed?
If you call the OCO hotline number, you will get OCO hotline staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and if you call 211, they could connect them to that number.
So what I'm directing them to do is to contact them, to give them sites that would be good to visit where they're having these encounters. And then we're looking at where they're having some real problems to see if the police can, especially in the school where they're having some vandalism issues, try to have the sheriffs go and visit more often. So are the sheriffs making referrals to 211? A lot of times they carry cards that they have the information that they're handing out when they have an encounter.
Yeah, so we, which I actually brought some today if anybody wanted to, but every
Yeah, I
year
think it would be good to have some.
we reach out to law enforcement across the county, and we provide them with palm cards so that if they do come across homeless individuals and off hours, they know during the hours they can contact the agency, but on business hours, they refer them to that 211 number to call for housing services referrals.
Are you scheduled to speak at the police academy?
That would be it? Or police
No,
academy?
police academy.
No.
All right, I'll take that up as a sidebar conversation with you. I have to spend the morning, people with disabilities, and people with disabilities homeless, how to interact with them, da-da-da-da. If you'd like to come and be part of that for a few minutes and talk about, there is a process, there is a piece.
Yeah, we can talk about it, Jim, and we could probably connect with OCO because they do a lot of that street outreach, so.
Yeah, because I've got a whole half a day. I mean, I can talk for a half a day. I'd probably start repeating myself. So, I'm trying to throw three other people in there that might have some useful information for. So I'll give you a call.
Okay.
So these are, some of these single mentally ill folk, if they're on safety net, it's, they get about $190 a month for rent.
For shelter, yeah, that's for shelter months.
That's an issue. How do you survive on paying, where do you find a place to spend a month at $190? We brought it up as an issue over and over with the state. There was a big push at one point for commissioners to come in and ask all of you to raise the rent on the county share. I mean, we're in safety net, we're already paying 71%. We don't know, we're at a loss. We put them up in temporary housing, and we have to make a plan for shelter when somebody, it doesn't matter whether it's, what season it is. So it's not like we're turning people away and they're going into the cemetery in Mexico to sleep. It's
Right,
just
the
not-
people, a lot of those people are people that are not seeking service. If they do seek your help, you have to try to make a plan for that.
We have to. Yeah.
Okay, anything else that you want to bring up on the homeless issue and housing?
Anything else, Gidget, we should mention? Personnel, it hasn't gotten any better. We continue to lose people. We're having a hard time recruiting, hiring. We're at about 22 vacancies with caseworkers, most we've ever seen. And our numbers are way up on reports for child protective reporting. We are right now, This is a report that comes off our state data system. But we've got 834 open child protective reports right now. We're supposed to investigate, either indicate or unfound, and close within 60 days. That's our timeline. Get it done within 60 days. And right now, our overdues total 583. So that's about 70% of our 69.9% of all our open cases are overdue. But what's even more startling is 168 of them are more than 6 months overdue. 13 of them are more than a year overdue. 267 are over 3 months overdue. So, we just keep getting farther and farther behind. We do have 10 total, 5 caseworkers, 5 seniors that are retired or have left our agency within the past year. And we are bringing them back. We did an all-call to everyone who had left in good standing with good work and asked them to come help. So we're really fortunate. I think the first started
Couple of weeks ago.
And we're onboarding them as they're willing to come and help us. Morale is not good, as you can well imagine.
If we were successful in raising them, the caseworkers 1 grade, would the all-call perhaps again be more successful, you think?
Oh, I think some of them might come back to us permanently. What they left us for wasn't a huge leap in pay. Many of them miss us. They don't.
Okay, so if we were able to pull that off, then that will be an important thing to make sure we do another.
That's my priority. My priority would be to provide 1 grade up to caseworkers, which means because we are really the only department where there isn't 2 grades between the frontline staff and supervisors, you can't pull them up to the same grade as supervisors. So when we pull up caseworkers 1 grade, we have to pull up the seniors 1 grade, and we have to pull up the managers 1 grade, because there's no room otherwise. Again, any other department who has frontline and supervisors, there's 2 grades between them, not us. So.
Is that something fixed by the CSEA contract?
Well, it is now, because that's the way the wages came out, but
Well,
I don't know,
that-
that goes back probably decades, right?
The idea of having those
To the
in between.
compensation study that was done.
So we have to go from a 6 to an 8, there's no 7. How do you change that?
There is a 7.
No, there is a 7.
There's a 7.
There's a 7, yeah.
It's just when I say 2 grades between them, I mean,
In the same sequence of.
the same sequence
Job.
of.
Okay.
So a caseworker is an 11, a senior caseworker is a 12, and a grade B is a 13. In most cases, it would be an 11 and a 13, employee and supervisor.
In the same line.
An accountant clerk might be a grade 8, senior accountant grade 10. So this is grade 9 in between. Social services, caseworker would be 8, senior would be 9. There's no grade between.
Oh, I see.
So it doesn't give, especially is,
But I thought you were talking, I thought the increase was from 6 to an 8 for the caseworkers that we were talking about. It's just.
No.
Caseworkers
It
are,
was from 6.
social welfare examiners are 8s.
Examiners.
I mean, yeah, it's on the level,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so we need to find time to revisit that and figure and see
I can resend the email I sent, in April or May, I think.
All right, I'll look for that.
Lord, is that structure laid out in our contract, the CSA contract?
Yes.
So it's a change in the contract. It's the way it's laid out now, that's what was approved. And the scales were approved back in October, so.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just raising
No.
one group,
No,
or
it's
one grade.
It's laid out in the contract.
Okay.
Well, that's why I brought it to the Board of Legislators' attention for the last 4 years and asked and tried to justify.
Let me finish what I say here. If that contract negotiation was done for the CSA and our negotiating team, okay? So it was the CSA that set the parameters, not the legislators. And then the employees signed it, agreed to it. So we can only do so much. You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
well, let's get on back on track.
Well,
So-
I just need to know a yes or no. That's all I need to know.
So you're on to new strategies to increase candidates for,
Yeah, so we're, I thought we were on Indeed right now, but apparently we're still not. You know, these platforms are not easy to get around, to negotiate. It's a big learning curve, but now I'm understanding that one of the consultants that you hired to come in to look at DSS from Bonadeo said that they just hired a couple of 20-somethings who didn't know what Indeed was. Now it's Handshake. So there's all these, you know, I don't know if there's something we could do to hire some consultant, how expensive that would be, but we can't just post civil service tests up anymore. It's just not gonna cut it. It's just not. And I can't, you know, like the airlines, they can cancel flights even if you're stuck at an airport someplace. They can do things. There's nothing we can do. We've got to go out there. We've got to investigate child protective reports. I can't compete with anybody's salaries, whether there was a negotiating team or not. I was told I couldn't give input unless it cost more money. So I didn't give input. I've been giving input for 4 years. I just don't know what to do, folks. But it's beyond safe.
Stacey, will you send me that email as well?
Sure.
That breakdown, please.
so.
I think because, you know, September's meeting is an evening meeting, you might want to expect about this issue. Just to let
That's
you
what
know.
it is.
Can you
But we
encourage?
need workers to go out and investigate.
We're in a meeting, you need to be recognized, so we have to remember that, okay? It's not just a free-for-all discussion. Jay?
Well, is there any way we can set up a meeting with the union folks that are at CSEA to talk to them? I mean, I don't understand why we're not talking right to them.
Well, you can't, you're not allowed to bargain with only a section, you have to be the entire union. And that could be done through HR. You can set up a labor management.
And the co-op includes DSS and non-DSS employees, so.
Yeah, it's a process. It's difficult to try to navigate it, and that's why we lost hospice. We couldn't pull those nurses out and say they're not being paid what they should be paid, so they all left. We had to transfer the last one and now at the end.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we can't lose DSS because it's mandated that we do it.
I understand that, I'm just saying that it's the same concept when you talk to the union, it's the whole thing. It's that they're not gonna let you take a segment. So you're right, that's gotta be a conversation that takes place.
Okay, well, so you have in here that CPAC activities on recruitment, retention of caseworkers. Was there anything to report on that?
So, they had the big group meeting, what workers brought up more than anything was pay. And CPAC is also recommending this increase recognizing we can't recruit without it. They are now going to be meeting in small groups. So they had caseworkers who attended the large group gathering felt like they couldn't really be heard in such a big gathering and with so much emotion.
Some were hurt.
So, yes, so we're having, our staff development coordinator will begin to arrange for groups of 5 caseworkers and a senior caseworker, and some of our grade B supervisors. Our supervisors are managers, and they will be doing more solution-focused.
Right, okay, so can you make sure that we are in discussion with CPAC about continuing to have a couple of legislators there?
Absolutely, yeah, we did talk about that, and they are absolutely fine with that. And I think that in the next CPAC full meeting, they will be coming up with actual recommendations for all of you.
But they're gonna try to do the focus groups in between?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I did give you some CPS data as far as the open cases and how far behind we are. Legal services.
It's not a bad idea to put that in a file now and then and send it out, so I can share it with the caucus at least.
Yeah, I've been a little short on time to try and put anything in writing or pull things
Well, I mean,
together.
it doesn't have to be a big, huge explanation, and just
I
a
know.
64% increase in homelessness, 834 open reports.
Yeah.
Should close in 60 days and 70% are overdue. I mean, this, as a reminder, I mean, even though I write this stuff down,
Yeah, Bonadeo has been a pretty big lift. They've been taking a lot of our time to put things together. They wanted some foster care figures. I have not gotten you the rates for foster care increases. We're there. It's just, again, the turnover of people out with COVID. We're just not able to keep up in any place. Just no place, including the commissioner's office. So we do the best we can. Take it one day at a time. That's all I can do. Send my prayers.
any questions for Stacy? Yes.
I'm not sure if this is directly to you, Stacy, maybe it's just to everybody. I think one of the, and we touched on it a little bit, is just this sort of quandary between, I'll speak for myself, I do have a desire to raise the salaries of the caseworkers, if that needs to go up the chain. Personally, I actually don't have a problem with that. I think that the issue is we're dealing with this union issue, not to place it solely on that, but it's kind of the elephant in the room, if you will. But I guess I keep going in my mind is that we can't be the only ones from a county perspective dealing with this issue. So I guess it's just curious as to how else are other people pushing through. I mean, I gotta imagine there's other DSSs out there that have union county employees that are asking these same questions about, geez, our pay is pretty low, given the state of the economy. And I guess I just wonder how they're pushing through the same issues. Are they dealing with the same issues? I mean, beyond the strategy of just guns a-blazing and saying, we're doing it and the heck with you and trying to stop this sort of thing, which I don't know what the end result of that. I guess I'm looking for that other piece of the puzzle that says, well, is the union really going to be that nice, or is it opening it all up, or is there another strategy that we haven't thought of in terms of providing the support, the pay that's really required at this point? I'm not sure. So I throw that out on the table as and maybe not a question that we can answer right this moment, but we got to find a way. We got to find strategy that allows us to get to that place without.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any ideas, let me know. But, this isn't my first rodeo, but, this is the first time I've ever been this scared. It's like, where are all the people? I know where the clients are. It's just, where are the people looking for jobs?
Well,
And it's
it's-
hit every industry.
I
think
mean-
that's the other thing, is it's not just
There is.
caseworkers.
I agree.
It's hit every industry, so.
Well, the problem is the caseworkers' jobs have been, is so much harder than it used to be. There's just such a worsening of the way people, on the edge are reacting, violent behavior, drug-involved families, it's just not the same as it was 10 years ago. It's
No.
just not the same. Any other questions for Stacy? Behind the scenes, we are trying to work on this stuff. Believe it or not, it is not fast, but we're working on it. All right, look for the appropriate motion. Okay, several made motions. Several seconded. All those in favor? Thank you.